The sun beat down on my back as I leaned against the poolside lounger, the cool turquoise water lapping at the edge of the deck. Sarah, my girlfriend, was already in the pool, her laughter echoing as she splashed around. We were in Miami for a weekend getaway, staying at the Ocean View Grand, a grand, old hotel overlooking the beach. It had charm, a certain aged elegance that appealed to both of us. We had arrived a little after noon, the room a welcome respite from the humid Florida air. We unpacked, our laughter echoing in the spacious suite. It was a corner suite on the 11th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering an expansive view of the ocean. I took a minute to admire the view, noticing the faint smudges on the window. I figured it was just dust, the kind you get in an old building, and let it go. An hour later, we were back in the room, the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues. I grabbed a towel and headed to the bathroom, while Sarah rummaged in her bag. As I passed the window, I saw them. Dozens of tiny handprints, smudged and dusty, marred the pristine glass. My blood ran cold. They weren't there before. Sarah, I called, my voice a strained whisper. Come look at this. Her laughter stopped abruptly as she emerged from the bathroom. We stood there, speechless, staring at the ghostly prints. The sun had set, casting the room in a soft orange glow. The handprints looked like they were made by small children, their tiny fingers smeared across the glass. What is this? Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. I don't know, but they weren't there before. A wave of unease washed over me. My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. Maybe it was a prank, a bored hotel staff member. But the prints were too numerous, too perfect, too real. We tried to ignore it, but the creeping sense of dread remained. We turned on the TV, the flickering light offering a temporary solace. But every time I looked at the window, the handprint stared back at me, a silent accusation. Eventually, exhausted and scared, we fell asleep, the handprints looming over us like a silent threat. The night was filled with restless sleep, punctuated by disturbing dreams of unseen children, their laughter echoing in the darkness. Morning brought a thin sliver of hope. The handprints were gone. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, Sarah said, trying to sound unconvinced. I wanted to believe her, but the unsettling feeling lingered. I couldn't shake the image of those handprints, the chilling memory of their sudden appearance. Later that day, a strange encounter at the front desk only fueled our growing unease. Excuse me, I said to the young man behind the counter. Do you know if there's any kind of maintenance that happened on our floor last night? He looked up, his face registering surprise. Maintenance? No, not that I'm aware of. Is there a problem? I hesitated, unsure how to phrase my question. I didn't want to sound crazy. Well, I began, there was something on our window last night, these little handprints, and they're gone this morning. I wondered if someone had cleaned them off or something. The young man's gaze took on a strange, almost nervous quality. He glanced at the floor, then back at me, his eyes wide. Handprints, he stammered. On the 11th floor. His reaction was unnerving. Yes, the 11th floor, I confirmed, my voice tight. He swallowed, clearing his throat before speaking again. Well, sir, this hotel has a bit of a history. There was an incident a few years back. A woman, she threw herself and her children from the balcony on the 11th floor. He paused, his voice barely a whisper. They say you can sometimes see them, hear their laughter. The blood drained from my face. I barely managed to nod, my mind reeling. The handprints, the children's laughter, the woman's tragic end. It all felt connected, a chilling truth veiled in whispers. We left the hotel that evening, the lingering fear a heavy weight on our shoulders. The sun set over the ocean, casting long shadows across the beach. I looked back at the Ocean View Grand, its grand facade hiding a dark secret. The memory of the handprints, the chilling story from the front desk, etched themselves onto my mind. The hotel was haunted, a silent monument to a tragic past, and I had inadvertently walked into its ghostly embrace. The weekend getaway had become a nightmare, the ocean breeze carrying the phantom echoes of laughter and despair. The handprints, a chilling reminder of a tragedy that had occurred on that floor, were a potent symbol of a past that refused to fade. The following weeks were filled with a lingering feeling of unease. I couldn't shake off the image of the handprints, the chilling story whispered by the front desk clerk. The memories of the Ocean View Grand, once a beacon of romantic escape, felt tainted, forever associated with a tragic past. Every time I looked at the window in my own apartment, I imagined those tiny fingers reaching out, their presence a constant reminder of the unseen world beyond our own. One evening, while scrolling through online forums, I stumbled upon a discussion about the Ocean View Grand. It was a forum dedicated to sharing paranormal experiences, and the thread was titled Ocean View Grand, a haunting tale. The stories were chilling. People described eerie whispers, flickering lights, and the laughter of unseen children. Some even mentioned seeing a woman in white, her face obscured by shadows, standing at the balcony railing on the 11th floor. But one story, written by a woman who claimed to have stayed on the 11th floor a couple of years ago, sent a shiver down my spine. She described seeing tiny handprints on the window, just like the ones I had seen. They weren't there when we first checked in, she wrote. I thought it was a prank, but they kept reappearing, even after we wiped them clean. It was like they were always there, a constant reminder of something, unseen. Her story mirrored our own experience, a confirmation of the chilling truth that had haunted our weekend getaway. I shut down the laptop, the fear a heavy weight on my chest. The Ocean View Grand was a place where the past lingered, where the echoes of a tragedy reverberated through its halls. It was a place I wouldn't dare revisit, a place I would forever associate with the chilling, indelible memory of those tiny handprints. The handprints on the window became a symbol, a chilling reminder of the fragility of life, of the unseen forces that can shape our experiences. They were a testament to the enduring power of tragedy, a constant reminder that the past, even in its most horrific forms, can leave its mark on the present. I never went back to the Ocean View Grand. The memory of the handprints, the chilling story of the woman and her children, stayed with me, a silent reminder of the ghost that lurked within the hotel walls, a ghost that would forever haunt the memories of those who dared to enter its domain. I never revealed the whole story to Sarah, afraid of the terror it might bring back. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the shadows stretch long and the wind whispers through the window, I see them again. The tiny handprints, a chilling reminder of a tragedy I witnessed, a tragedy that forever changed my perspective on the world beyond our own, where the past refuses to fade and the unseen lingers, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of a haunted past. The moving truck had just pulled away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and the echo of its rumbling engine. I stood on the porch, a lone figure in the face of the sprawling, unfamiliar house. My parents were inside, already unpacking, their voices a muffled murmur. I, however, felt a wave of loneliness crash over me. I was 14, and this was the third state I'd called home in as many years. Every time, it was the same, a new school, new faces, new anxieties. I felt like a character in a movie, perpetually running from the past, never quite settling into the present. The house was a stark contrast to the one we'd left behind. This one was older, with a sprawling garden and a porch that had seen better days. Inside, the walls were a pale beige, devoid of any personality. My room was particularly depressing. A bare mattress lay on the floor, a lone pillow thrown haphazardly on top. A dusty old alarm clock with large, red numbers sat on the nightstand, a silent testament to the past. I spent the rest of the afternoon exploring my new surroundings, my footsteps echoing in the empty rooms. The solitude was both unsettling and comforting, a stark reminder of the life that awaited me. As evening settled, I felt a surge of exhaustion. I collapsed onto the mattress, the thin fabric offering little comfort. I closed my eyes, the silence broken only by the ticking of the clock. 10:24 flashed on the clock's face. The numbers seemed to mock me, a reminder of the passage of time, a passage that was becoming increasingly difficult to grasp. I felt a sudden urge to sleep, to escape the mounting anxieties. I snuggled deeper into the pillow, my breathing slowing. Then, something strange happened. I blinked. It was a simple act, a barely perceptible movement, but it felt like a chasm had opened up within me. When I reopened my eyes, the world seemed to have shifted. It was still dark, the room bathed in the soft, ethereal glow of the moon, but it felt different. The air was crisper, the silence more profound. I looked at the clock. 10:24. The numbers stared back at me, unblinking, their red glow seeming to pulse with a strange energy. I blinked again. And again. Nothing changed. The time remained frozen, a bizarre, unyielding constant. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of fear and confusion. Had time stopped? Was I trapped in some kind of time loop? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I sat up on the mattress, every muscle in my body tense. I looked out the window, but the world outside seemed to be moving, cars passing, street lamps casting their dim light. But the room was still dark, the clock still displaying that same, mocking time. The reality around me had splintered, a distorted reflection of what it should be. I felt a growing sense of unease, a creeping dread that threatened to consume me. I lay back down on the mattress, my mind racing. I tried to piece together what had happened, but every attempt seemed to lead to a dead end. Had I slept for hours without realizing it? Was this a bizarre form of sleep paralysis? My thoughts were interrupted by a sudden sound. It was the chirping of birds, a cacophony of joyous melodies that seemed to come from a world away. I froze, my eyes wide with disbelief. It was morning. Light streamed through the window, painting the room in a warm, golden hue. I looked at the clock. 10:24. The numbers stared back at me, unfazed by the change in the world outside. A wave of nausea washed over me, a feeling of complete and utter bewilderment. I had blinked, a simple act, and 12 hours had vanished, swallowed by the abyss of time. The rest of the day was a blur. I moved through it in a haze, my thoughts scattered, my body feeling inexplicably heavy. Every time I looked at the clock, the same mocking time greeted me, a symbol of the broken reality I was living in. I tried to tell my parents what had happened, but they dismissed it as teenage angst, a product of stress and the new environment. They couldn't understand the terror that gnawed at my insides, the terrifying feeling of being trapped in a broken timeline. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt isolated, disconnected from everyone and everything around me. I oscillated between moments of normalcy and flashes of paranoia, the memory of that blink, that stolen 12 hours, always lurking in the back of my mind. I started to research, delving into the strange world of time anomalies. I stumbled on theories about wormholes, alternate dimensions, and the fabric of reality. The explanations were complex, often contradictory, but they offered a glimmer of hope, a way to make sense of the impossible. I started to notice other strange occurrences. I would look at a clock and the time would seem to skip, only to return to its original position moments later. Doors would open and close on their own. I had fleeting glimpses of people's faces, faces that didn't belong to anyone I knew. My reality was crumbling, a fragile mosaic that was slowly falling apart. I felt like I was losing my grip on sanity, on my sense of self. Was I going crazy? Was this what it felt like to be losing one's mind? One night, I was sitting in my room, staring at the clock, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. The clock displayed the same time, 10:24. I felt a surge of despair, a feeling of being trapped in an endless loop. I closed my eyes, willing the time to move, to break free from its stasis. Then, I heard a faint hum, a rhythmic vibration that seemed to come from the clock itself. As I watched, the numbers on the clock began to dance, the red glow flickering, morphing into a swirling vortex of light. I felt a tingling sensation in my fingertips, a warmth spreading through my body. The world around me began to spin, the room swirling into a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of the experience, the feeling of being ripped apart and stitched back together. When my vision returned, everything was different. The room was no longer a sterile box of beige walls. It was filled with light, with vibrant colors, with the warmth of family and laughter. I looked at the clock. It was a new clock, digital and sleek, displaying the time, 10:25. My parents were there, smiling at me, their faces etched with relief and love. They had been worried about me, about my strange behavior. They had taken me to a doctor, but he hadn't found anything wrong. They attributed my anxieties to the stress of the move, a temporary phase that would soon pass. The 12 hours I'd lost, the time that had disappeared into the void, never came back. But the experience had changed me. It had made me more aware of the fragility of time, the fleeting nature of reality. It had taught me to cherish the present, to appreciate the moments, big and small, that make up a life. I never spoke of the time skip again. Not to my parents, not to my friends. The memory stayed with me, a dark secret hidden beneath the surface, a reminder of the inexplicable, the unexplainable. It was a mystery that I had to live with, a part of my story that I could never fully understand. But there were moments, brief flashes of insight, when I felt the echo of that time skip, a feeling of disorientation, a fleeting glimpse of something beyond the ordinary. And when it happened, I would simply blink, just like I had that night, letting the past slip away, embracing the mystery of the moment. In the tranquil embrace of a starlit night, my innocent childhood dreams were shattered by an encounter that would forever alter the fabric of my young mind. I vividly recall the chilling sensation that coursed through my veins as I awoke from a restless slumber, my heart pounding with an inexplicable dread. With trembling hands, I disentangled myself from the confines of my bed sheets and stumbled towards my parents' room, my bare feet padding softly against the cold wooden floor. As I approached the doorway, a paralyzing horror gripped me. Standing in the dim light cast by the hallway lamp was a shadowy figure, its pale countenance devoid of any discernible features. A piercing gaze met mine, sending a jolt of terror through my being. I froze in my tracks, our eyes locked in a silent confrontation. The figure remained motionless, its silent stare seeming to bore into my very soul. For an interminable eternity, we stood there, suspended in a moment of unspoken communication. In a desperate attempt to escape the oppressive weight of the figure's presence, I turned and scrambled onto my parents' bed, burrowing beneath the safety of their covers. The sheets provided a semblance of comfort, yet the image of the apparition lingered in my mind, its eerie gaze forever etched into my memory. Through the thin fabric of the covers, I could sense the figure's continued presence outside the doorway. Its steady breath, a haunting counterpoint to the pounding of my own heart, sent shivers down my spine. Minutes turned into hours as I lay there, trembling and unable to sleep, the specter of the apparition casting a long shadow over my youthful innocence. As dawn approached, the figure finally disappeared, leaving me shaken and traumatized. I remained awake until my parents stirred from their sleep, my mind racing with questions and fears. When I hesitantly shared my experience with them, their immediate reaction was one of concern and disbelief. They assured me that there was no intruder in the house and that I must have simply had a bad dream. However, deep down, I knew that what I had witnessed was anything but a nightmare. The fear, the terror, the palpable presence of the figure, it was all too real to be dismissed as mere imagination. Days turned into weeks, and I struggled to shake off the aftereffects of that fateful night. The memory of the apparition haunted my every waking moment, casting a pall over my once carefree existence. I became withdrawn and anxious, constantly scanning my surroundings for any sign of danger. As the years passed, I gradually learned to cope with my childhood trauma, but the memory of that night remained a haunting reminder of the fragility of my youthful innocence. It was only when I reached adulthood that a chilling realization dawned upon me. The figure I had seen that night was not a ghost, but rather a flesh-and-blood intruder scoping out our home. The thought that I had been so close to danger, that a stranger had watched me sleep, filled me with a fresh wave of horror. I realized that my childhood nightmare had been a real-life brush with danger, a harrowing experience that had left an enduring mark on my psyche. With newfound determination, I sought therapy to help me process and overcome the lingering trauma of that night. Through talking, writing, and facing my fears head-on, I gradually came to terms with the experience and its profound impact on my life. The memory of the ghost in the doorway serves as both a reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the shadows and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It is a story that I have carried with me throughout my life, a bittersweet reminder of the transformative power of fear and the enduring strength of the human heart. In the quietude of the night, as the city slumbered beneath a starry sky, I lay awake in an uneasy trance. The air was heavy with an oppressive stillness that sent shivers down my spine. My body felt frozen, anchored to the bed as if by an invisible force. I was trapped in the insidious grip of sleep paralysis, suspended between the realms of consciousness and unconsciousness. My mind was alert, hyper-aware of every creak and groan of the old apartment. The darkness seemed to press in on me, suffocating me with an unseen presence. I struggled to move, to break free from the paralyzing grip that held me captive, but my limbs refused to obey. Suddenly, a faint rustling sound broke the silence. I held my breath, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. Slowly, the sound grew louder, morphing into the unmistakable tread of footsteps. They approached from the direction of the den, each step heavy and deliberate. Fear surged through me, threatening to consume me whole. I tried to scream, to alert my boyfriend to the impending danger, but no sound escaped my lips. My voice was trapped within the confines of my paralyzed body. The footsteps drew closer, and with them, a sense of dread that permeated every fiber of my being. I could feel the cold, malevolent presence hovering over me, its icy breath sending shivers down my spine. It was a creature of darkness, unseen but all too real, its intentions as opaque as the night that enveloped us. For an eternity, it stood there, its silent gaze boring into me. I felt its cold, predatory eyes scanning my body, assessing my helplessness. I wanted to beg for mercy, to plead for my life, but my voice remained trapped within the depths of my paralyzed body. As abruptly as it had appeared, the figure retreated into the darkness of the den. The footsteps faded away, leaving me alone with the echoes of my terror. I lay there trembling, my body still paralyzed but my mind racing. When I finally regained control of my limbs, I stumbled out of bed and into the den. The spare bed where I had been sleeping was empty, the sheets rumpled as if they had been tossed aside in haste. I could feel the cold, lingering presence of the dark figure, its scent hanging heavy in the air. I made my way to the bedroom, where my boyfriend lay sleeping. I shook him awake, my voice trembling with fear. He sat up, his eyes wide with concern. I told him about the sleep paralysis, about the dark figure that had stood over me. To my surprise, he didn't dismiss my experience as a mere nightmare. He listened intently, his face pale and his brow furrowed. When I was finished, he told me that he had seen something strange the night before as well. He had been sleeping in our bedroom when he woke to the sound of footsteps. He opened his eyes and saw a dark, shadowy figure pacing in front of the bed. It moved with an unnatural grace, its form shifting and flickering like a wisp of smoke. He said he had tried to speak to the figure, but it didn't respond. It simply continued to pace, its movements hypnotic and unsettling. He had fallen asleep with the light on, too terrified to turn it off. As I listened to my boyfriend's account, a cold shiver ran down my spine. We had both experienced something unexplainable, something that defied logic and reason. We knew that we were not alone in that apartment, that something sinister lurked in the shadows, watching us with unseen eyes. We never spoke of that night again, but the memory of the dark figure haunted us both. We moved out of the apartment shortly after, unable to shake the feeling that we were being watched, that we were being hunted by something that we could not see or understand. To this day, I still wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat and trembling with fear. The memory of that night is etched into my subconscious, a reminder that there are things in this world that we cannot comprehend, things that exist beyond the realm of our understanding. And somewhere out there, in the darkness, I know that the dark figure still lurks, waiting for its next victim. In the hushed stillness of the night, as the moon cast an ethereal glow upon the sleeping town, two young girls found themselves huddled together in a bedroom, their hearts pounding with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. 12-year-old Emma and her friend, Chloe, had been close companions since childhood, sharing countless secrets and adventures. But on this particular evening, as they lay side by side on Emma's bed, a sense of unease crept into the air. "Do you know what will make the devil mad?" Chloe whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Emma shook her head, her eyes wide with curiosity. "No." "What?" "Tell him that God loves him," Chloe replied, a mischievous glint in her eye. Emma hesitated for a moment, considering the implications of such a bold declaration. But the allure of the unknown proved too strong, and with a mixture of trepidation and excitement, she uttered the words, "Hey devil, God loves you." Chloe echoed her friend, her voice trembling slightly. "Hey devil, God loves you." Silence descended upon the room, a thick and palpable weight settling in the darkness. Then, from beneath the bed, came a deep, rumbling laughter that reverberated through the stillness. It was a laughter devoid of mirth, echoing with ancient malice and sinister intent. Emma and Chloe froze, their bodies rigid with fear. Their eyes darted around the room, searching for the source of the laughter, but they could see nothing. The laughter continued, growing louder and more menacing with each passing second. It seemed to seep into their bones, chilling them to their very core. Minutes turned into what felt like hours as the girls huddled together, their hearts pounding like war drums in their chests. They dared not move, fearing that any sudden motion would invite further horrors upon them. The laughter finally subsided, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. Emma and Chloe lay there in petrified silence, their minds racing with 1,000 questions and fears. How had they angered the devil? What would he do to them in retribution? As the first rays of dawn peeked through the curtains, the girls slowly began to move. Trembling with both fear and relief, they climbed out of bed and cautiously approached the spot where the laughter had originated. To their astonishment, there was nothing beneath the bed but dust bunnies and forgotten toys. Emma and Chloe never spoke of their experience that night again, but it left an indelible mark on their young hearts. They had glimpsed the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of reality, and they knew that they would never quite be the same. Years passed, and Emma and Chloe grew into young women. They went their separate ways, but the memory of that fateful night remained with them, a secret they shared only in their hearts. Emma became a successful businesswoman, but she often found herself haunted by the laughter that had echoed beneath her childhood bed. Chloe, on the other hand, became a nurse, devoting her life to caring for others. But even amidst the pain and suffering she witnessed, she never forgot the terror she had experienced that night. One evening, as Emma sat alone in her living room, a news report caught her attention. A local church had been vandalized, its walls defaced with blasphemous graffiti. A wave of anger and sadness washed over Emma as she realized that the darkness she had encountered as a child was still very much alive in the world. Driven by a sense of urgency, Emma reached out to Chloe, and together they decided to revisit the scene of their childhood nightmare. As they approached the house where Emma had once lived, a strange sensation came over them. The air grew heavy, and the trees seemed to whisper secrets to each other. With trembling hands, they knocked on the door, and to their surprise, it was answered by an elderly woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Jenkins. Emma explained their reason for being there, and Mrs. Jenkins invited them inside. The house had changed little over the years, and as Emma and Chloe stepped into the bedroom where they had shared that terrifying night, a chill ran down their spines. They made their way to the spot where the laughter had come from, and as they approached, they noticed something strange. There was a small, wooden box hidden beneath the bed. Curiosity overcame them, and they carefully retrieved the box and opened it. Inside, they found a single sheet of paper covered in faded handwriting. The handwriting was Emma's, and it read, "Dear Devil, I know that you are listening. I know that you hate me for what I said that night. But I want you to know that I am not afraid of you. God loves me, and He will protect me from you. Sincerely, Emma." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she read the words she had written so many years ago. She had been a child then, filled with a mix of innocence and defiance. But now, as an adult, she understood the true weight of her words. "You see," Mrs. Jenkins said softly, "the devil is a liar. He wants you to believe that he is all-powerful, but he is nothing but a shadow. The only power he has is the power you give him through your fear. But when you stand up to him, when you defy him, you take away his power." Emma and Chloe embraced, sharing a moment of profound understanding. They had both faced their fears that night, and in doing so, they had reclaimed their own power. They knew that the darkness would always be there, lurking in the shadows, but they would no longer be afraid. As they left the house, Emma and Chloe took solace in the knowledge that they had not only confronted their childhood nightmare but had also discovered a truth that would stay with them for the rest of their lives: the devil is real, but only as real as you make him. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind that always felt like a Monday in 8th grade. My backpack felt heavier than usual, laden with textbooks and the looming pressure of my upcoming history test. I was already running late, the clock on the wall mocking me with its relentless ticking. "I'm going, Mom," I yelled, grabbing my lunchbox and shoving it into the backpack. I could hear her humming from the kitchen, a melody that was as constant and comforting as the sunrise. My hand reached for the doorknob, a familiar, comforting ritual. But before I could turn it, I noticed something strange. The storm door, the one that stood between our front door and the world, was ajar. It wasn't fully open, just enough to let in a sliver of cool morning air and a glimpse of the sidewalk beyond. I stopped, my hand hovering over the doorknob. It was a strange sight, the storm door open like that. Mom was always meticulous, making sure everything was in its place. The storm door, especially, was a point of pride for her. She'd even reprimanded me once for not closing it properly after a rainstorm. I was about to call out to her, a question forming on my tongue, when something caught my eye. The lock on the storm door. It clicked, a faint, metallic sound that resonated in the quiet house. The lock, which was previously in the closed position, flicked to open without a hand touching it. My heart skipped a beat. It was like something, or rather, someone, had unlocked the door. I didn't have time to ponder the implications or even feel fear. My mind seemed to be on autopilot, fueled by the urgency of getting to school. I pushed open the door, my feet moving before my brain could fully process what had just happened. The sidewalk was empty. There was no one walking by, no cars driving past, no sign of movement whatsoever. It was as if the world had held its breath, waiting for me to step out. I stood there for a moment, staring into the empty street, the breeze carrying the distant hum of traffic and the sweet scent of blooming honeysuckle. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the rhythmic thudding of my heart. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a cold sensation that had nothing to do with the crisp morning air. A voice, like a whisper against the wind, seemed to echo in my mind, "Go. Go to school." I looked around, searching for the source of the voice, but there was nothing but the empty street and the stillness of the morning. It felt like a hallucination, a figment of my imagination, fueled by the inexplicable events that had just transpired. Okay, Okay, I mumbled, more to myself than anyone else. I was running late, the thought of my history test looming large in my mind. The inexplicable event, the unlocked door, the strange voice, all seemed to fade into the background. It was just a weird, inexplicable thing that happened. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to a faulty lock or a playful breeze. At school, I struggled to focus on my classes, my mind constantly replaying the events of that morning. The image of the lock flicking to open on its own, the empty sidewalk, the whisper in my mind, they lingered like a bad dream, a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. That day, I confided in my best friend, Lisa, a girl with a penchant for the supernatural, a girl who believed in everything from ghosts to aliens. She listened intently, her wide eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and disbelief. "It's gotta be a ghost, right?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the classroom hum. "It unlocked the door for you. Maybe it was your guardian angel, looking out for you." I scoffed, "Don't be silly, Lisa. It was probably just a faulty lock. Or a prankster. Maybe even the wind." But even as I said those words, a sliver of doubt lingered in my heart. The image of the empty sidewalk, the ghostly whisper, it all felt too real, too unsettling to be just a figment of my imagination. As the days turned into weeks, the strange incident faded into the background. The pressure of school, the constant stream of homework and tests, the usual teenage dramas, they all conspired to push the memory into the recesses of my mind. I tried to forget about it, to dismiss it as a figment of my imagination, a product of a tired and stressed mind. But the memory lingered. Every time I walked past our storm door, every time I heard a strange sound, the feeling of that morning came flooding back, a cold shiver running down my spine. I started paying more attention to the house, to its nooks and crannies, to the things that normally went unnoticed. My mom, oblivious to my growing obsession, went about her daily routine, humming her tunes, tending to her plants, a picture of normalcy. One afternoon, while I was helping her with the dishes, I asked about the storm door. "Mom, do you ever notice the storm door lock is sometimes loose?" I asked casually, trying to sound unconcerned. She gave me a puzzled look. "Loose? I haven't noticed anything." "Why?" I shrugged. "Oh, nothing. I just thought maybe it was a little wonky. I remember you mentioning it once." Her brow furrowed. "No, honey, I never said anything about a wonky lock. Are you sure you're not making things up?" I looked away, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. The voice, the empty street, the unlocked door, it wasn't a figment of my imagination. I wasn't making things up. But how could I explain it to her? How could I explain it to anyone? That night, as I lay in bed, the image of the unlocked door flickered in my mind like a bad movie reel. I tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep, my thoughts racing with questions. Who or what had unlocked the door? Was it a spirit, a ghost trying to communicate? Was it a trick of the mind? And why? As the night wore on, I felt a presence in the room, a feeling of being watched. I wasn't sure if it was real or imagined, but it made my skin crawl. I could feel the air growing heavy, the silence becoming oppressive. Suddenly, I heard a sound, a soft scraping sound emanating from the hallway. My heart hammered in my chest, my breath catching in my throat. I froze, listening intently, every nerve in my body on high alert. The sound came again, a soft, insistent scrape. It was like someone dragging something across the wooden floor, like someone trying to open a door. I sat up in bed, my eyes wide with fear. I had to know what was making that sound. I had to know if I was truly alone in the house. I threw off the covers, my feet hitting the cold hardwood floor with a thud. I crept out of bed, my senses heightened, my every muscle tense. I moved cautiously towards the hallway, my hand trailing along the wall, seeking reassurance in the familiar texture. As I reached the hallway, the scraping sound stopped. The silence was almost deafening, the air thick with anticipation. I peered around the corner, my heart pounding in my ears. Nothing. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My eyes darted from one side to the other, searching for any sign of movement, any hint of danger. The silence seemed to stretch on forever, a heavy, oppressive blanket. I was about to turn back when I heard it again. A soft whisper, barely audible, coming from the direction of the living room. Go. Go to sleep. My eyes widened. The voice. It was the same voice I had heard that morning. It was a voice that felt both familiar and foreign, a voice that whispered of secrets and mysteries. I froze, my body paralyzed with fear. The whisper faded into the silence, leaving me alone in the darkness, my mind reeling. I rushed back to my room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pulled the covers over my head, trying to block out the darkness, the silence, the unsettling feeling of being watched. Days turned into weeks, the strange events continuing. The whispering voice, the scraping sounds, the feeling of being watched. It became a part of my life, a constant, unwelcome presence that haunted my dreams and my waking hours. I confided in Lisa again, sharing my newfound terror. She listened, her eyes wide with wonder, her voice hushed with awe. "It's your house spirit," she announced, her tone filled with a mixture of excitement and fear. "It's trying to tell you something. You need to listen." I scoffed, but deep inside, a seed of doubt was planted. Lisa, with her fascination with the supernatural, was a constant source of both amusement and frustration. But this time, her words resonated with me, striking a chord of unease that I couldn't ignore. I tried to find out more about the history of the house, searching old records, talking to the neighbors, any clue to the possible presence of a spirit, a ghost. But my research yielded nothing. No tragic tales, no unexplained deaths, no whispers of hauntings. The only thing I found was a faded newspaper clipping tucked away in a dusty corner of the attic. It was an article about a local farmer who had died in a freak accident on our property years ago. His name was John, and he was known for his kindness and generosity. The article mentioned that John had always been fascinated with the house, its history, its secrets. He believed it was haunted by a friendly spirit, a spirit that watched over the house and its inhabitants. As I read the article, the memory of the whisper came back to me. Go. Go to school. Go. Go to sleep. Could it be John? The friendly house spirit, watching over me? Was he trying to warn me of something? I decided to speak to him, to communicate with the spirit. I went into the living room, the same room where I had heard the whisper, and sat down on the floor, my eyes closed, my mind open. "John, if you are there," I whispered, my voice barely a breath, "I want to understand. I want to know what you're trying to tell me. Please, let me know." The silence stretched out, an eternity, broken only by the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the creaking of the old house. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest, my senses on high alert. And then, I heard it. A soft whisper, faint but clear. "There is danger. Be careful." Then, silence. I opened my eyes, my breath shallow, my body trembling. My mind raced with questions, with possibilities. What danger? Where? From whom? I didn't wait to find out. I knew, deep down, that John was right. There was danger. And I had to be careful. The strange events continued, the whispering voice, the scraping sounds, the feeling of being watched. But now, I understood. I understood that John, the friendly house spirit, was trying to warn me. I understood that there was danger, a danger I didn't fully comprehend but had to be wary of. The memory of the unlocked door, the empty sidewalk, the haunting whisper, became a part of me. A reminder of the unseen world, the world that lies beyond our understanding, a world where spirits whisper secrets and ghosts watch over us. I never figured out what the danger was, or who it came from. But I knew that John, the house spirit, was looking out for me. And I learned to listen, to be aware, to be careful. And most importantly, I learned to appreciate the mysteries of the universe, the inexplicable wonders that lie hidden in the shadows, waiting to be discovered.